Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother asarimhotep with the Madhu Andela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. And this is the Mbonji, the online learning center where we discuss major issues and concepts, and we try to iron things out to the best of our abilities. And today is Thursday, October the 15th, and I am starting a series of programs and presentations titled Why I Can't Rock with the Bible. These will be extensions of the initial conversation that was started a few weeks back on why I left the Hebrew Israelites. And so for, that video garnered a lot of commentary in the comment section, and it there was a lot of confusion around, why I left the Hebrew Israelites. And for a lot of folks, they believe that it has to deal with the Hebrew Israelites itself. And while that may be a factor, it is not the bulk of why I had to leave the tradition and ultimately the Bible alone. It has to deal with the Bible itself. So that's what we're going to discuss in this series, just a series of things that, that were in the Bible itself, the inner logic of the Bible that began a series of conflicts, and more of that when we return. Indeed, indeed, indeed. Welcome to the program. Again, I want to thank you all who have decided to join the conversation and be enlightened or be big bad, however you want to look at it this afternoon. A few announcements prior to me getting started, and that is that we have a series of interviews coming up that you may want to listen live. And the first one is coming this Friday. And so for those that don't know, a group of 4 individuals, including myself, started what we call Black Science Month. And Black Science Month is celebrated in October, and it is October, where we promote science in general and specific fields, of course, in particular, but more so African and African American scientists, so that we can encourage others, younger folks, and maybe even some older folks, to become more scientifically literate and hopefully inspire a number of individuals to actually go to school and join, one of the major STEM fields. And so, kicking it off for us is going to be Dr. Jean-Philippe Gourdin. He's out of Guyana, but he lives here in the United States now, and he's a glycobiologist. I think he also deals in genetics as well. But what's cool about him as well is that he also publishes and discusses, biological issues pertaining to, ancient Kemet as well. So him and Dr. Shamarka Keita have done some joint papers and things of that nature. So, and he's also one of the, editors for the Khahir's Caribbean, a journal, an Egyptology journal that was started by uh, the recent ancestor, Dr. Alan Anselin. And so we'll get into more of that on tomorrow. So that's going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern time, Friday the 16th. And so moving on to Sunday, the 18th, continuing in our Black Science Month celebrations and interviews, we have with us Dr. Sadiqa Watson, who's a data analyst and a statistician. And you might as well just say a mathematician. She is one of the founders. So I'll be talking to her on the 18th, and this is going to be at 2 p.m. on Sunday, October the 18th. And so I'll later on in the month, I'll have the other two founders, and their individual stories we'll discuss, later on. So she is one of the founders, one of the co-founders of Black Science Month, along with myself. So this will be a very, very dope. She's a very dope sister, dynamic mathematician, and scholar. So be on the lookout for that, or set your reminder. And then finally, we have Dr. Wade Nobles, who we've had on the show, some years back. So it's been a minute. So if you are not familiar with Dr. Wade Nobles, he is a psychologist, one of the founders of the field of Black psychology, and a very dynamic, African-centered scholar and, pioneer in Black psychology. So we're going to talk about an array of things, so you don't want to miss this. This is going to be on the 29th, and I believe that is a Thursday, and it's going to be at 2:30 p.m. that day. So 1:30 p.m. Central, and so you don't want to miss that. So go to the YouTube channel and find it and set a reminder, or if you have not subscribed, please subscribe so that you get the notifications when I create shows and the shows have started themselves on that day and hour. And then, of course, I have to promote the Patreon page. And so, for those that don't know, I have set up a Patreon page, for two reasons at the moment. The first is to garner support for this channel, so that we can continue to do what we do, and as well as to raise funds for the Chiena Into film that I'm doing. And so the Chiena Into, it just means into family in Chiluba Bantu language. It deals with the relationship between the Bantu speaking people and the ancient Egyptians in a wide range in terms of history, in terms of language, culture, ritual, religion, and philosophy. And so it's going to be a very dynamic film, and this is something that you do not want to miss. So, visit the website at patreon.com/asarimhotep and get the latest news and become a Patreon subscriber. And so, as always, I want to give a shout out to all of the people who are joining us live. And that is RC Moabite, peace to you, Shaka Plus, Jeremy Kador, if I'm saying that correctly, Donnie Williams, Oronde Branch, Freddie the Third, Jay Carter, Brother Chavez, Lakeisha Dunn, and Ramza, and Bonton 007. And thank you for your donation. So yes, another way in which you could support the channel is to donate directly from the chat, here. So I appreciate, everyone for joining in. Peace to Sister Tamika and Donald G. Simmons Sr. I guess were you in here earlier? No, there's another Don. So there's a Don Williams and a Don Simmons. So peace to both of you, and thank you for joining. Okay, so now we can get down to business. So as I stated at the beginning of the program, this beginning of this series was inspired by the responses that I got from my program, in where I, kind of outlined in general why I left the Hebrew Israelites. So for those who are not familiar, I used to be a member and adherent to the teachings of what was then known as the Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge, which is now known as the Israeli School of Practical Knowledge, or better known as the ISUPK. And so I belong to a camp that originated in Texas, who I guess the camp before that was actually out of New Mexico. So, going through a number of evolutions and deep studies, ultimately I had to leave the tradition alone, as well as the Bible itself. And in the comment section, there was a lot of discussion on, maybe I just belong to the wrong camp. Maybe I just need to have the Holy Spirit, to come and, kind of manipulate my thoughts to get back to the truth. Because, all cults have the truth. And so, I wanted to do this series and clarify again that it has nothing to do. I'm not going to say nothing. It does not have much to do with the Israelites themselves. They are a part of that. I would say maybe 1/3, but the other 2/3 have to deal with the Bible itself. The another 1/3 of that is the inner logic of the system, and then the other third is just the history and the development of the Bible and things of that nature. So it's a very complex and interwoven tapestry of issues for that, motivated me to leave the text alone and not recommend it as a source of inspiration or a model for which, we should emulate and pattern our lives after. And so today's conversation is going to center around two stories that fall in that mix. And so it's not just simply these two stories. This is just two stories that have a common theme that is among many. And this has to deal with the treatment and the value of women. And so I'm going to ask, and I know there's going to be a time delay from where I'm saying it live in my space and how you're going to it and when you're going to hear it. So I'm gonna give it a little time to see your responses. So for those who are in the chat, whether you're on Facebook or whether you're on YouTube, and I'm gonna speak specifically to the males. So I'm gonna ask the males first. How many men in my chat room right now have daughters? Just say yes, I have at least one daughter. It doesn't have to be your blood daughter. Say you married into an already established situation and your wife has a daughter, or your girlfriend has a daughter, but you claim, that the young lady as your family. How many men who are listening live have a daughter? And I'm gonna give it a second to see if this is the case. And let me make sure that while I'm waiting on that everything is kosher on the Facebook. Okay, cool beans there. And so I see Brother Chavez, Freddie, Jay, Bontum, T, Savior, etc., Kendall, all these are RC Moabite. They say, yes, they have daughters. So here's my second question. So let's assume that I come to your house. I'm in your city and you invite me to your house. And a mob of gay dudes want to come and rape me. They knock on your door and they say that we want to rape Brother Asar. Hand him over. How many of you men who just answered would not turn me over to the men to get raped, but instead would offer your daughters in exchange? So I'm gonna give it a few moments, because the time delay. How many of you, either T Savior, RC Moabite, Kendall Anderson, Freddie, Brother Chavez, Ramza, Oronde Branch, Jay Carter, which one of you is willing to sacrifice your daughters to be raped in exchange for me, because I am your guest in your home? I'm just trying to see something, and y'all can answer honestly. There's no judgment here today. Now, I can't speak on everybody else who's watching, but for me right now, there's no judgment. How many of you would offer your daughters in exchange for me to be raped to the mob of gay dudes who surrounded your home? Jay Carter says, sorry, you would be a done deal. Sorry. So we know Jay Carter would not offer his daughters in exchange for me. Bontum says, I'm sorry, brother, but you would have to go. He said they like gangbangs anyway. I'm trying to see something. Brother Chavez says, nope, sorry, bro. Even though we from H-Town, you wouldn't give your daughters up, for the town, for the H, Brother Chavez. Rhonda Brand says, nah. And RC Moabite says, absolutely not. This is a very good topic. And so so the general consensus is, see, and we're gonna keep this in mind. So I like this answer here. Kendall Anna says, I couldn't give up my daughter, but will assist in putting up a fight. So keep Brother Kendall's conversation or his statement, in mind as we move forward. So this is the thing here that we're going to discuss. And so when somebody is telling me that I need to adhere to the logic and the tenets of the Bible. What they are saying is that the Bible is the best model to shape and pattern one's behavior and values after. And so the stories that we're going to read today is going to demonstrate why. It's just going to give, saying one example of why, it is not the text to emulate your life after, to value. So for us, who are listening now, everybody automatically says, no, they would not give up their daughters. They wouldn't even suggest it, in exchange for me as their guest, in their home just yet. So what I'm going to do is share my screen. So we're going to go to the Bible, and peace to brother Kofi Pasai. He says he wouldn't offer his daughter either. His comment coming from Facebook. And so where was I? Oh yeah. So we're going to go to the Bible. We're going to, and although I have a physical Bible here, this is a New American Bible. But I'm going to read the digital version because, technology now, we got the whole Bible on the internet. And so I'm at BibleGateway.com. And because the text is kind of small here, I'm going to, or I have already just copied and pasted the two chapters in which I'm going to examine. So the two verses that we're going to deal with is going to be in Genesis 19 and then in Judges chapter 19. So let me Donald Simmons says he would do neither. He would shoot first, ask questions later. Exactly. So, you guys who are in the chat are a different breed of people than the biblical writers. So, so we're going to go into Genesis, and let me share my screen and share my Chrome tab, and then boom. And so let me make sure that, let me know if the screen is big enough that y'all can read the text. Let me see. So, okay, here we go. And why can't I increase my size here? Okay. Even though my touch screen is not letting me use my hands to increase the size. So y'all just bear with me if you can't see the text clearly. So, if you have another window open, I don't know if any of y'all are on your phone or whatnot, but if you have a Bible, handy, or if you have another screen, and y'all want to double check what I'm saying here, this is from the Bible Gateway, and this is the New International Version of the text. So I was going to go King James on you, but I'm not going to give you King James today. So, so let's examine this. So for those who are not familiar, this is the Sodom and Gomorrah story. So we know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Allegedly, in the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah, there was a lot of homosexuality and some other unnamed sins. And God sent two angels to Lot and his family to warn them to get out of the city because God is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And so out of everybody who is living in these two villages or towns or whatnot, Lot and his immediate family are the only righteous people, in the entire group of people. So that's why the angels come and, warn them. So now we're starting off Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis chapter 19, verse 1. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. My lords, he said, please turn aside your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night and then go on your way early in the morning. No, they answered, we will spend the night in the square. But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared, and we're talking about Lot, prepared a meal for them, the angels, baking bread without yeast, therefore the unleavened bread, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom. So, I don't know how many men lived in Sodom, but the text says all of them came, every last one of them. So 2 or 2,000, that's a lot of dudes coming to Lot's house, both young and old. So little dudes was out there and old dudes was out there and surrounded the house. They called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them. So it's clear that these dudes, this was a mob of gay dudes. So if you can imagine the pride parade just took a left and just ended up in front of your door, and then all the dudes from the pride parade, demanded that you bring your male guest out so that they can have sex with them. So they're telling you what their intent is. And they weren't like, so we can act so they can probably have sex. They're going to force their way. In other words, they're going to rape the angels, the dudes. So now, Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind them and said, no, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. So, as my hypothetical scenario at the beginning of this conversation, a gang of menses, not men, menses, come to rape the 2 angels who are guests in Lot's home. Lot comes outside, close the door like, yo, son, how you gonna disrespect my house like that? No, don't do that wicked thing. I have 2 virgin daughters. They had never had sex before. Y'all can do whatever you want with them, but leave the angels of God alone. That's what he just said. So you have to wonder, what's going on here? And so he says, get out. So now the menses, not the men, the menses, yell out to like, get out of our way. This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them. They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. So they was just so filled with lustuses. I'm just going to murder all kinds of words tonight. So, y'all bear with me. So they was just so, overcome with lusts that they wanted, man meat, that, they were pressuring Lot and moving closer, ready to break in the door. They don't want none of that young, beautiful virgin daughters. They want angel ass. And you know there's no female angels in the Bible. All angels are men's. So just put that out there. I'll continue. Verse 10. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so that they could not find the door. The two men said to Lot, do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry of the Lord against his people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it. And you know, they get out of the house, and then y'all should know the story, and the wife turns back and looks at Sodom and Gomorrah and turns into a pillar of salt. And you know, the story continues where, you know, Lot's daughters get the father drunk, get Lot drunk, and then have sex with him because they believe that the world has ended, and they have children. And it should be known, for the record, this is another conversation for another day, that Jesus' line is directly from this line. So, you know, Jesus is the product of incest between Lot and his daughters. But that's another conversation, again, for another time. The point here is, again, that when a mob of gay men's surrounded the household of Lot, he offered his daughters to be raped instead of either saying, angels, hey, y'all gotta go, or yo, I got your back. We finna murk these fools out here. You know, none of that happened. And so this tells you the value. And so again, it would be different if Lot and his family were the antagonist of the story. They are the protagonist of the story. So remember that the angels are sent to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And the only righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah is Lot and his family, which is why they're saved. So, you know, along with the laws against homosexuality in the text, there's no kind of law in, you know, or some kind of diminishing value on your character if you offer your daughters to be raped. So raping is not really a big deal amongst the Israelites. And so this is problematic. And just like Les GFJ says, you know, is cowardly. And so exactly at Chavez. So, you know, they're the only righteous people. So when did offering, you know, your daughters to be raped is an honorable thing? And so if you think that this, and I saw something earlier, I want to acknowledge it right now. So peace and blessings to you, Conan Lee, for your contribution and your donation all the way out in the UK. I'm very much appreciative. Thank you for listening and for your contribution. So let me see. So I want to know, you know, again, I already got the answers, but this doesn't seem like an example of manhood. This is not a model of manhood, you know. And so Sister Tamika says it was hard being a woman, a girl in those days. If we were to live under biblical laws, it would still be hard for you. And so, women have certain freedoms today because of the non-adherence to biblical laws. And of course, all Israelites would swear that that's a problem, but you have mobility and flexibility in modern times when people are smart and don't take this stuff to be fact and law. And so again, if this was the only story like this, we can chalk it up as coincidence. But, when you read the Bible, you see there's a pattern of this behavior, which tells us that this is a core and central value in terms of the non-value of women in the text, And so we move now to Judges chapter 19. And so I will continue. And y'all can read the rest of Lot and their story in Genesis 19 and 20. So now in Judges 19, subtitled "A Levite and His Concubine." Now this story here, I don't know what to say, but I'm gonna say it anyway. And so this one's going to require a little bit more reading, so bear with me for reading, but I want to make sure that we cover everything and give context. So now, okay, so chapter 19 verse 1. In those days Israel had no king. Now a Levite who lived and for those who don't know, the Levites are the priestly tribe of the 12 tribes of Israel. So now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. So he took a wife from the Bethlehem in Judah. So this is the same Bethlehem in which Christ was to later be born. Jesus of Nazareth was to be born and whatnot. So this unnamed Levite lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim. He took a concubine or a wife from Bethlehem of Judah, but she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her parents' home in Bethlehem, Judah. After she had been there 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys. She took him into her parents' home, and when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. There's other versions of this where it says that she whored. And we got to understand that there's no evidence that she cheated on him. It's not that she went and looked for another man to have sex with. That's not what the text is alleging. She's considered a whore or an unfaithful because she just up and left the dude and said, I'm returning back to my father's place. And so she stayed with her father, not with some other dude or anything to that nature. So this should be the first clue that she recognized something's not right with this dude. And so she's willing to risk it all to go back and move with her father because she believes that she will be safe at her father's home, the home that she grew up in, and was nurtured and loved, allegedly, etc., etc. But we'll see how this story goes in just a few moments. Continuing in verse 4. His father-in-law, the woman's father, prevailed on him to stay. So he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. So, recapping, Levite dude finds a wife from Bethlehem, Judah. For some reason, she leaves and goes back to Bethlehem to live with her father. He, the unnamed Levite dude, decides to go all the way to Bethlehem and retrieve his wife and convince her to come back home with him. And so the father-in-law, the wife's or the concubine's father, invites him to stay, and he stays at their crib for 3 days. Now we continue on to verse 5. On the 4th day, they got up early and he prepared to leave. But the woman's father said to his son-in-law, refresh yourself with something to eat, then you can go. So the two of them sat down to eat and drink together. Afterward, the woman's father said, please stay tonight and enjoy yourself. And when the man got up to go, his father-in-law persuaded him, so he stayed there the night. On the morning of the 5th day, when he rose to go, the woman's father said, refresh yourself, wait till afternoon. So the two of them ate together. Then when the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave, his father-in-law, the woman's father, said, now look here, it's almost evening. It's almost dark now. I don't want you, walking in the dark all the way, back to, to Ephraim, the town of Ephraim or the village of Ephraim. Early tomorrow morning, you can get up and be on your way. But unwillingly to stay another night, the man left and went toward Jabus, that is, Jerusalem, with his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine. When they were near Jabus and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, come, let's stop at this city of the Jebusites and spend the night. His master replied, no, we won't go into another city whose people are not Israelites. We will go to Gibeah. He added, come, let's try to reach Gibeah or Ramah and spend the night in one of those places. So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Gibeah in Benjamin. There they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them in for the night. That evening, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the inhabitants of the place were Benjamites, came in from his work in the fields. When he looked and saw the traveler in the city square, the old man asked, where are you going? Where did you come from? He answered, we are on our way to Bethlehem in Judah, to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim, where I live. I have been to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I am going to the house of the Lord. No one has taken me in for the night. We have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for ourselves, your servants, me, the woman, and the young man with us. We don't need anything. You are welcome in my house, the old man said. Let me supply whatever you need. Only don't spend the night in the square. So you see a common theme here. So remember that the angels insisted that they spend the night in the square, but Lot insisted that the 2 angels spend the night in their place. And so we see here the unnamed Levite, his concubine and servant were going to just spend the night in the open square. And the old man says, nah, you should be in a sheltered place. Come to my spot. While they were enjoying themselves, hold on, let me see. You are welcome at my house, old man. Let me supply you with you. So he took it into the house and fed his donkeys. After they had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. Pounding on the door, they shouted to the old man who owned the house, bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with them. Does this sound familiar to any of y'all who were listening? Now, I see it, and this is especially, the when you have debates with Hebrew Israelites, they want to swear up and down that the Egyptians, for example, were homosexuals. But you don't find any stories such as this where all the men, and these are all Israelite men in every single one of these stories. These are all Israelite men. So we have here another story in a town full of Benjamites. These Israelite men, I shouldn't say men, menses. These Israelite menses surround the compound and ask for the owner of the house to bring the male guest out so that they can have sex with him. The owner of the house went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing." Now look here. You know how he probably had that shady, like what's his name from the Martin show? Jerome. No, not Jerome. Even though Jerome would do it, but Hustle Man. So you know how Hustle Man always look like this and be like, "Look here, Chief," and open his coat and he has all the trinkets that he done stole somewhere trying to resell them. So we gonna imagine that the owner, the old man of this house, is just an old version of Hustle Man. He's like, "Look here, Chief. Here is my virgin daughter and his concubine." So the old man offers his virgin daughter and then going to offer his guest wife to be raped by all the menses that are outside surrounding the compound. He said, "I will bring them out, Chief, to you right now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't you do such an outrageous thing." Now, y'all tell me, am I reading this wrong? Am I out of pocket? Do I not have the Holy Spirit in mind? Is I'm just not one in communion with the Holy Spirit that I can get this story, that I can see these patterns. So we see in the Lot situation, we have the same exact thing. So this is a different telling of a similar story, in the text. So all of, you might as well just say all the Israelite dudes is gay. And we have more verses that we can go and show that these dudes was gay as I don't know what. But, that's neither here nor there about them being gay. That's not the point. The point is that when there's a mob of menses, and you got to rub your chest when you say it, you got to like slide your finger when you say menses. So you have outside a gang, a mob of menses trying to rape your male guest, and instead of putting up a fight and defending your guest, you instead offer your virgin daughters to be raped by these men. And then in this situation, in Judges 19, he not only offers his own daughter, he's just going to just arbitrarily offer the wife of the Levite man. So now we're going to continue with the story, because this gets a little bit more interesting than what we saw with Lot and his family and daughters. So where was I? So now we go to verse 25. But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them. And they raped and abused her throughout the night. And at dawn, they let her go. So all night, this woman was being abused and raped all night. It says all night. There is no mincing of words here. It wasn't for like 10 minutes. It wasn't, in an hour, not even 2 hours. This was straight up all night. And so, hold on one sec. I'm trying to find something. Here we go. There we go. So all night, and then they return her in the morning. So where was I? At daybreak, the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight. When her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house, with her hands on her threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. Then the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts and sent them into all areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it was saying to one another, "Such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came out of Egypt." Just imagine, we must be doing something. So speak up. So let's before we go, let's recap here. So the dude allowed for his concubine. Remember that this dude, when the woman left him the first time, he went all the way and risked life and limb to go get this woman from her father's home. So you spent all that time in journeying and got a servant with you and a donkey and you got supplies together. So you know that the place wasn't close, because when you have to get a donkey and supplies and water and bring a servant with you, this is a long journey. So this long journey you took to go get this woman, then, on your way back home, you get to a point where you need to rest. So you spend the night at a man's house, and then a gang of menses surround the house saying they want to rape you. But the other dude offers his daughter and your wife, and you just say, "Here, take her." What was the point? If you were just going to just give her up that easy, why would you waste all that time going to Bethlehem, Judah, to be at the house and spend all of them days just to get her back, just to, when you're not even halfway home yet, just give her up to be raped by a gang of dudes? And then when she comes home back to you distraught after she's been raped and brutalized all night long, she can't even speak or get up. You have to pick her up and put her on a donkey to go somewhere. You get home and then you cut her body up and then spread her body parts around Israel. How sick of an individual do you have to be? The Bible is the worst text ever for models of manhood. And I will say it to anyone's face. And I dare one of y'all try to justify this. I know who not to let in my home, and I know who will always keep the peace on, if you were in my presence, because you can't be trusted. Anyone who tries to justify this behavior. And so let me continue, because it gets better. And so notice that God doesn't come and intervene, doesn't strike him down, none of that, because this is the culture. Women, daughters, they're nothing. They're a means to an end. You can rape them, beat them, sell them, do what the hell you want. What is a woman? What is your mother? You know, and if look, and y'all wonder why I had to leave, because when you talk to Hebrew Israelites, you know, they adopt this value system. And matter of fact, there's I don't know what I think it's the GOC group of Hebrew Israelites talking about in the kingdom that these grown 30, 40-year-old men will be having sex with girls as young as 9 and 12. Like, if I'll put it like this, if anybody is a Hebrew, any male is a Hebrew Israelite, keep them away from your daughters. Matter of fact, if any of them like eyeing your daughter, you know, you got to put some hands on them, you know, and keep the thing on you, because they can't be trusted. They're a bunch of rapists, and I'll say it. And a lot of them will be listening to this and be like, you know, no, that's not me. Yes, it is you. This is your value system. This is what you try to promote and say, we Israelites. So you saying we are a bunch of gay dudes who be trying to rape other men, and who would offer our virgin daughters up to be raped by a gang of gay men, and then, you know, we'll beat and cut up our daughters or our wives if they happen to be raped by these men. So this is the kind of behavior that just, you know, you just can't get with. And I don't know any reasonable man, anybody who has an ounce of manhood in them, that would allow for any of this. They would die before they let somebody come, you know, in your presence and rape your daughters and wives. And so, you know, anybody mad at this, y'all can stay mad. We're going to continue. So then all of Israel, from Dan, you know, the tribe of Dan, to Beersheba, and from the land of Gilead, came together as one and assembled before the Lord in Mizpah. The leaders of all the people of the tribes of Israel took their places in the assembly of God's people, 400,000 men armed with swords. The Benjamites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah. Then the Israelites said, "Tell us how this awful thing happened." So the Levite, now he's trying to justify and explain himself. He says, the husband of the murdered woman said, "I and my concubine came to Gibeah and Benjamin to spend the night. During the night, the men of Gibeah came after me and surrounded the house, intending to kill me." They weren't intending, so he lied here. Well, you know, not necessarily, but they didn't intend to kill him, so he lying here. So they came to have sex with him, to rape him. They raped my concubine and she died. I took my concubine, cut her into pieces, and sent one piece to each region of Israel's inheritance, because they committed this lewd and outrageous act in Israel. Now, all you Israelites, speak up and tell me what you had decided to do. And so the rest of the story goes on that, you know, now they're gathering. So now they're going to go back to the town of Gibeah and wreak havoc and revenge for them raping the wife. But this is the wife that you gave up to be raped. They came to rape, to have sex with you, not your wife. And you gave them up. The two dudes that need the ass beaten is the old man of the home and the husband, who came back and lied. You know, she was unresponsive doesn't mean she was dead. You know, how responsive can you be when, you know, you have been raped and beaten all night? She was trying to recoup. You know, I haven't been raped before, but I imagine if somebody was forcing, if a gang of dudes, not just one, a gang of dudes was forcing themselves and beating me all night, that I would not have much energy to be able to move. And so this is the kind of stuff here that when we're looking for models of manhood, it does not provide. And again, the Levite man is not the antagonist. The gay dudes are the antagonist in the story. The protagonist is the Levite man. So there's no scripture on how bad him or Lot was or anything to that nature. They're celebrated in the text. Matter of fact, Lot is allowed to live and bring forth the lineage of Christ through his daughters who he had sex with. You know, and Jasmine Red says the really sad part is that there's so many men who have this mentality today. Indeed. And there's a reason for this. And I will get into this now. Hold on one sec. Okay. So, I mentioned, if y'all caught the show, I interviewed Dr. Karanja Keita Carroll, and I brought up the whole notion of the culture of honor. And so to understand these two stories in the biblical text, hold on one sec. Lion Times Baby says, don't forget that you was a Hebrew too. Doesn't mean you condone rape at the time in their defense. That's my point, because I didn't defend rape and stuff. I couldn't defend the book. I couldn't support the book, so I had to leave it alone. That's the point. And so those who willingly know these stories and stay and try to justify it, those are the individuals you can't trust. It is what it is. And they are all potential rapists. All Israelite men are potential rapists. It is what it is. And so again, when we're talking about these particular cultures, because people who are religious have this tendency to believe that the scriptures that are given to a populace came out of heaven, and that it was some divine, revelation in things of this nature. That is far from the case. Some human beings that belong to a human culture. I shouldn't even say human beings, because by African standards, these are not humans. Israelites are not human beings. And we can have a discussion on what that means in a deeper sense. But the Hebrew Israelites are not human beings according to African tradition, which is why they were called, the Amu by the ancient Egyptians. It's a word for cattle, because of their lifestyle and their beastly attitude, their beastly nature. And we'll get into that. But the point here is that the Bible is the outgrowth of a culture and a mindset and a paradigm and a worldview that existed before, the text was written. And so their conceptualization of God, of what is right and wrong, are all the outgrowth of the values of this culture. There was no divine revelation. There's an anthropological answer for this, and this is what we're going to get into in terms of the culture of honor. So let me see. Yeah, Conan Lee says, some strong language, all are rapists. Yes, I didn't say they all are rapists. I said they all are potential rapists. There's a difference. Let's say, hold on one sec. Tamika asks, Israelite of the Bible or ancient Israelites, are they the same in your opinion? They're all the same in my opinion. Whether you were actual real Israelite, a Hebrew who lives in the Middle East, and or you're a fake Hebrew Israelite, black folks out in Harlem, in Brooklyn and Jersey, Philly, Texas and California, those, people believing that black folks in America who are the descendants of Africans from the slave trade, or the Native Americans, that these are all Hebrews, those are fake Israelites. And they are the same, in my opinion, because it's a mindset, is a value system. It is a pattern of behaviors. And, once you adopt another people's culture, you adopt their mindset, their worldview, which is why we have, for example, these deep and rich arguments and a lot of literature on Afrocentricity versus Eurocentrism, because you have a lot of black people who adopt Eurocentric worldviews, and those Eurocentric worldviews and values shape how they move and operate and behave in the world. And those people, those black people with Eurocentric worldviews and behaviors or whatnot, are detrimental to the movement of freedom, et cetera, et cetera. They're always compromised and always work on behalf of strengthening European people while diminishing and devaluing African people. And so it's the same when it comes to the Abrahamic folks, the Israel-centric, if we can make up a term, or Arab-centric, folks. They all have the same thing. It doesn't matter. And we'll get into why that is the case just now. And say, and so what I want to do here is share with you some excerpts and quotes on the culture of honor. And so for many of you who have, let me make this full screen so y'all can see. Boom. Okay, so let me wait a second and make sure that hold on. Okay, so I'm seeing it on the other platforms, and so I'm ready to go. So again, this is part 2 to today's conversation. Why I Can't Rock with the Bible, part 1, Poor Models of Manhood. And for Ma Howard, I see your commentary on my Facebook page, and so I will address your commentary. And so on the Harold Johnson page, for some reason, when you type something in a chat there, it doesn't show up on my main chat on my, on the back end on my screen here. I have to look at it on Facebook. And so but the asarimhotep chats, if you chat there, it comes up automatically behind the scenes. So I will address your commentary in just a little bit. I appreciate your comments. So, and thank you to D Centavo for your contribution. I appreciate it greatly. Thank you. So we're going to continue. So we're talking about the culture of honor. So what is the culture of honor? This excerpt is taken from a journal article called The Culture of Honor and Violence Against the Self by Lindsay Osterman and Ryan Brown. And so, because it's a journal article, this is not a year, but this is a page number, 1612. So on page 1612, it says the following. According to Nisbet and Cohen, 1996, cultures of honor place a unique emphasis on holding and defending the reputation and person of oneself and one's family. In particular, it is of the utmost importance for men in cultures of honor to maintain reputations for being competent providers and strong protectors. Perhaps because of this emphasis on strong reputations, men in honor cultures perceive interpersonal threats more readily than do men in other cultures. Furthermore, they are obliged to respond to such threats vigorously, even violently, which can be both dangerous and difficult. Therefore, it can and often does involve physical retaliation. Proper retaliation appears to be requisite for maintaining one's reputation as well as one's sense of masculinity. In other words, a man's sense that he is a real man and also his reputation for being such depends on his ability to successfully defend himself, his name, his family against any and every threat. So if you're not familiar with the concept of the culture of honor, these cultures are deemed to be more prone to violence because, in large part, if the person's honor is threatened in some way, the only way to redeem their honor is to resort to some kind of violence. And so, this theory and literature applies very well to the southern states, for example, and why the South and the Europeans were so much more violent here. Not that they weren't violent up north, but the whites in the South are more violent than the ones up north. And what they're saying is that the reason why is because in the early days of the Europeans coming to settle in what was to become the United States, the ones who dominated the South came from cultures that had this honor system, especially like the Scot-Irish group. And so we continue here because this part is a little bit relevant. And so this particular article has to deal with how the culture of honor also plays a big factor in how should I say, how the what am I looking for? How suicide plays a role into it, or how let me rewind it. How the culture of honor plays a major role in suicide here in the United States. And so so this is what this entire article is about. But this little subsection that we're going to, which is on the next page on 1613, is the subsection of women in cultures of honor. So we're going to start with this. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences down from the top, and it starts with the expectations are different. So the expectations are different for women than for men, however, as women are expected to conform to the socially prescribed role of a good or virtuous woman, namely being sexually chaste and loyal. Failure to do so harms not only their private sense of self-worth and their own reputation, but also the reputations of their family members, particularly their husbands. Recall, for example, the suicides of rape victims in some Middle Eastern countries, which presumably occurred to restore family honor, and perhaps also because the personal shame that typically accrues to rape victims may be seen as irreversible. Furthermore, as with men, women living in cultures of honor might feel unable to discuss or seek help for any distress caused by their failures to live up to their standards of virtue imposed by their culture. Seeking help could not only draw attention to the source of their shame, but also imply that their family members were impotent to help them, thus heaping additional indirect dishonor on their families. So, what I have highlighted here speaks to what was going on in Judges 19. So, in these cultures, Israelite, Arab, all the related, really Semitic and Persian cultures of the Middle East, when a woman is raped, the woman is shamed for being raped. And then the man is shamed that someone would rape him because now you can't protect your woman. And so, in order to bring honor back to the family, oftentimes the man will either kill the woman or the woman will kill herself. And so, when you understand the culture of honor in these cultures, a lot of what you see in the Bible will begin to make sense. And this is how you would know this has nothing to do with divine revelations from the Creator, that these were just, not very intelligent dudes who decided to put a text together to bring some sense of civility and order to their otherwise chaotic cultures. And so, you have to keep this in mind. And so, where do these cultures of honor, what role does the environment play in their mode of production? And so the next is the abstract for the text, culture of honor, violence and homicide. Then this is in the Oxford Handbook of Evolutionary Perspectives on Violence, Homicide, and War. So they state culture promotes beliefs and values that help its constituents to address local and enduring problems. And I have bolded here. We propose that cultures that allow and encourage certain forms of violence do so in response to specific ecological problems, namely pervasive resource deprivation and unreliable law enforcement. The convergence of these problems over long periods of time, we argue, results in a social environment that requires vigilant and aggressive defense of reputation, person, and property as a means of deterrence. As an illustration of such a culture, we discussed the history of the Ulster Scots, or Scot Irish that I mentioned earlier, who settled the southern and western United States in the 18th and 19th centuries. Regions that are characterized even today as cultures of honors, in quotes. We review empirical evidence regarding behavioral patterns in these honor states, and with a focus on evidence indicating that residents of these states are not more violent in general, but tend to display behaviors related to the vigilant and aggressive defense of honor at both the individual and collective levels. And that's like a very important point to observe and to recap, is that the culture of honor expresses itself in a number of ways, where it's not necessarily all the time just hardcore violence, but there's other aggressions that happen as a result of this particular logical patterning, so to speak. And this can happen, in generation to generation, even though they themselves are now far removed from the original environment and culture that originated, these particular patterns and ways of living. And so that's why, in answering Sister Tamika's question, and again, this is going to be reinforcing some other quotes. The Black Hebrew Israelites now in this modern day and age, because they've adopted that culture, now they have the patterns and behavior and psychological, synaptic connections, that make them behave this way, which is why you can't have a civil conversation with a Hebrew Israelite on the corner somewhere. Why are they always yelling and being aggressive at women and children and people walking by on the corners and have to yell and you can't get a word in and things of this nature? And they're always threatening you and calling you out of your name and stuff to this nature. That's not valued in African culture, but they're not Africans. They have adopted, Hebrew Israelite Semitic culture, which is rooted in this culture of honor. And so they have these other aggressions. That's why I say, regardless, if you are a person who adheres and believes in this Bible 100% as a male, you have, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, if y'all don't like it, to hell with you, you have a greater potential to be a rapist than anyone else, outside who don't belong to these cultures of honor. Because your behavior would be justified in the book. And you believe that this book was written by the hands of God. Same thing with the Quran. And when you have individuals who believe that, they can justify in their mind their behaviors, which would in any ordinary and logical sense would be out of pocket. And so we have to keep that in mind. So I continue. When such social adaptations become entrenched in the culture schemas, scripts, and identity dynamics, they can be transmitted from one generation to the next, long after the ecological circumstances that encouraged them have dissipated. So this, I should have just finished reading the rest of that. It just reinforces what I just said. So now that the Scott Irish bring their culture, their herdsman culture and culture of honor to the United States, it's become part and parcel of the central identity of the people. And so now, since it is ingrained in the culture in general without existing in that particular environment, the behaviors are the same as if they were still living in those environments. And so this is why, it's very important for us to step back and not get so emotional when we have these conversations and discuss these things. And we're looking for, external validations for a biblical text and the like. But we're going to continue. So when I first heard of the cultures of honor, it was from this text, Outliers, The Story of Success by Malcolm Gladwell. Excuse me. And he talks about it like this. Cultures of honor tend to take root in the highlands and other marginally fertile areas, such as Sicily or the mountainous Basque regions of Spain. If you live on some rocky mountainside, the explanation goes you can't farm. You probably raise goats or sheep, and the kind of culture that grows up around being a herdsman is very different from the culture that grows up around growing crops. This is very essential because the quintessential manifestation of a culture of honor are nomadic pastoralists who live in marginalized economic zones. So these are mountainous areas. These are deserts, whether they're ice deserts or the dry deserts. So these cultures that emerge out of the Middle East and Mesopotamia and the Caucasus Mountains and the mountain steeps of Germany and England, et cetera, where there's not an abundance of resources. It is ecologically poor, and the people adopt nomadic pastoralism as their mode of production. A certain type of culture emerges. And remember that the Hebrew Israelites are nomadic herdsmen who exist and live in the deserts. And so their value system is totally different from a hunter-gatherer or a farming producing community. And this is what we see in the biblical text. We continue. The survival of a farmer depends on the cooperation of others in the community, but a herdsman is off by himself. Farmers also don't have to worry about their livelihood, that their livelihood will be stolen in the night, because crops can't easily be stolen unless, of course, a thief wants to do the trouble of harvesting an entire field on his own. But a herdsman does have to worry. He's under constant threat of ruin through the loss of his animals, so he has to be aggressive. He has to make it clear through his words and deeds that he is not weak. He has to be willing to fight in response to even the slightest challenge to his reputation. And that's what a culture of honor means. It's a world where a man's reputation is at the center of his livelihood and self-worth. This is why the Levite man had to wage war on the people, because now his reputation has been tarnished because of his wife was raped, but he's the one who gave his wife up. So his reputation isn't tarnished because he gave his wife up. Is that she allowed herself to be raped by all the men. That's the crime. So since she allowed herself, quote unquote, to be raped by the menses, this is why his honor has been tainted, and why he had to cut up the body and then have to wage war on the town of Gibeah and get his other Israelite brethren. But another dynamic of this, which was just mentioned, is that the nomadic pastoralists have a habit of raiding other communities for their cattle. And when you look at the biblical Israelite text, when and this is going to be a part 2 or 3, I'm a restate this, and then I'm gonna go into the stories in which the Israelites were commanded to go into other cities and towns and murder everybody and take the land, because nomadic herdsmen believe in their mind that they are justified in raiding other people's communities and to take the work that they've done and built already instead of building from the ground up. That's typical Israelite. So if you're a Hebrew Israelite, you also have a greater potential in my eyes to be a thief and a liar, which is why I can't trust you. I can't work with Israelites, because of the culture, the value system of the people. So we'll continue. The culture of honor hypothesis states that it matters where you're from, not just in terms of where you grew up or where your parents grew up, but in terms of where your great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents grew up, and even where your great-great-great-grandparents grew up. That is a strange and powerful fact. It's just the beginning, though, because upon closer examination, legacies turn out to be even stranger and more powerful than that. So it's reinforcing this notion that your character can be traced through your cultural lineage. And so, we are justified when we're looking at the way that white people, for example, act today by looking at their ancestors and looking for the patterns or whatnot. So we'll continue. Cultural legacies are powerful forces. They have deep roots and long lives. They persist generation after generation, virtually intact, even as the economic and social demographic conditions that spawned them have vanished. And they play such a role in directing attitudes and behavior that we cannot make sense of our world without them. So just because you don't live in the mountains of Ireland or whatnot, under a certain context, live, under that culture and have adopted their values. So when we talk about Eurocentrism and Eurocentric values of individualism, materialism, robbing, stealing, et cetera, raping, killing, et cetera, this is the culture of many of the European groups whose cultures and civilizations were born out of nomadic pastoralism. And so when Black folks adopt nomadic pastoralism culture in the form of Islam or in the form of the Israelite tradition, then you have the potential, the greater potential, to manifest those values and things. And so that's what we're attacking here, and why we go so hard on the Bible and the Quran, because these are not our values. These aren't our people. These aren't our traditions. We don't condone any of this crap. And that was proven at the beginning of this conversation. When I asked all the brothers who have daughters, would you offer your daughters to be raped in exchange for me as a guest in your home if your home was surrounded by a gang of dudes who wanted to rape me? Not one of them said, yeah, I would offer my daughters, because that's not the African way. We die for ours and our family. And so hold on. And thank you, Tolu Lambo, for your contribution and gift to the channel. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you. And so there's a whole field of study on the culture of honor. And I've been studying this for years because I'm writing a book titled Religious Proselytization as a Form of Violence, subtitled The Infringement of the African Principle of Simultaneous Validity. And, a large part of the explanation of, these proselytizing religious groups, they all have in common that they are born out of traditions within the nomadic pastoralist tradition and the culture of honor. And so I had to do a whole, bit of study and research on, the evolution of human violence and reasons for this and that, and this stuff keeps coming up in the literature. And then when I examine and audit the characteristics of the Hebrew Israelite tradition, the Christian tradition, the Arab tradition, etc., they all fit into these categories very well. So there's a book, and I have this text, of course, The Culture of Honor, The Psychology of Violence in the South. And in this subsection, starting on page 6, it says the following. People who herd animals usually live in places such as mountains, semi-desert, and steppes, where because of the ecology, crop farming is inadequate to provide basic food needs. So again, where did the Hebrew Israelites live? They were nomadic pastoralists who were roaming back and forth throughout the desert. And only later did they settle in certain villages or whatnot in Canaan and whatnot. But Canaan was a totally different group who created their own civilization. So they didn't build one from scratch. They just settled in somebody else's territories or whatnot. But their culture had already been solidified and hardened by then. So they didn't change their ways because they were settled people. And so They have little surplus and sometimes experience genuine want. Thus, they are often tempted to take the herds of other groups. Remember, that was something mentioned earlier. They steal and rob other people. You know, a matter of fact, when Muhammad got his revelation from the Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, one of his first missions was to gather other Arabs and do caravan raids. That's all they do is steal. And so, you got to be careful about the values of these groups. So, thus, they are often tempted to take the herds of other groups. As a consequence, quote, theft and raiding are endemic to pastoral peoples. Again, Israelites, Arabs, and among others, the Germans, the Proto-Indo-Europeans, and even some African groups, the Fulani, the Collagen, the Dinka, Nuer, etc. And so just because you African don't mean that you're immune to this. Those nomadic pastoralist African groups exhibit the same behavior. And we'll discuss that in a second. We continue. Or as one herdsman of the Middle East put it, raids are our agriculture. So this is in modern times. This is 1996. Raids. So when you see Boko Haram coming in, raiding and stealing children and women to be concubines and all this other kind of stuff, that's common. That's the nature of the culture. These are African people who have adopted Arab culture. That's normal in Arab culture, whether they are black Arabs or not. Thus, skill at warfare is valuable to a herdsman in a way that is not to a hunter-gatherer or a farmer. It is no accident that it is the herding peoples of Europe who have been reputed to be the best soldiers of the centuries, that to the Scots, as the Swiss, Swedes, Albanians, Prussians, and other peoples of Europe's margins and infertile uplands, war has been something of a national industry. Why are these people warring all the time? And why are they get jealous when they see people just living their best life in places where food falls from trees and they have access to fresh water and abundance of beautiful land, while they in their environment have to scrape for things? This is also a motivation for a lot of the violence that they have. Poverty is a motivator for violence, and we should know this, any of us who lived in the hoods and the projects. So we continue. In addition to marginal Northern Europeans, many of, if not most, Mediterranean groups, including the traditional cultures of such peoples as Andalusians of southern Spain, the Corsians, the Sardinians, Druze, Bedouins, Kabyle of Algeria, the Sarakatsani of Greece, are all characterized as holding a version of the culture of honor. These groups all have economics that are greatly dependent on herding. Many other traditional societies of Africa and the steppes of Eurasia and North America also have or had herding economies and culture of honor. This is not race specific. The nature of the mode of production and the environment for which they find themselves play a big role in the development of this type of violent and non-value for human life type culture. And so this is what I was talking to Dr. Carroll with yesterday on why we have to modify Cheikh Anta Diop's dual cradle theory. Because it isn't a matter of northern cradle versus southern cradle. That's oversimplistic. And it makes it seem as if the African groups did not have these types of behaviors as well. And that's far from the case. And we have to be, as scientists and as scholars, we always have to be honest with ourselves and the public. So an even better natural experiment came with the introduction of the horse to the American Indians of the plains. Prior to the arrival of the horse, the tribes of the plains had been relatively peaceful. After its introduction, many tribes began to behave like herders everywhere. They reckoned their wealth in terms of the number of horses they owned. They staged raids on their neighbors, and they began to glorify warfare. In other words, they took on the values of Europeans and European products, and they started turning and acting like Europeans. That wasn't their way. That wasn't their culture at first. But since the Indo-Europeans who came here to the United States from Spain, from France, and the British Isles and whatnot, brought the horse and things to them along with the culture, they adopted it and started behaving like them. And so this is what I mean. It doesn't matter if you are a black Hebrew Israelite. As soon as you adopt the culture and the mindset and the values of the Bible, you act like the people of the Bible. And this is what the problem is. So hold on. Okay, and so also in that same text, and I forgot to put the page number here, the culture of honor also differs from others in an even more important respect. In addition to valuing honor, defined as virtuous conduct, it values often far more honor defined as respect of the sort which situates an individual socially and determines his right to precedence. And here's the part that's really highlighted here. Honor in this sense is based not on good character, but on a man's strength and power to enforce his will on others. That's the key point here. And so in the African traditions, and why when I do my separate, when I have my separate conversation on why the Israelites and white people aren't human, this will be one of the strong points. Because to be a man in these cultures of honor, it depends on your strength and power and your ability to enforce it on others, not having good character. You are not a human being in an African sense if you don't have good character. And so we'll continue. And so I wanted to put this here because, a lot of us get a little knowledge and we start making things black and white. Like white people do this and black people do this. That's not how this works. And again, as we discussed earlier, the culture of honor, it doesn't matter. This stuff develops independently around the world for all the groups who are nomadic pastoralists. And so there's a text titled Race and Identity in the Nile Valley, edited by Carolyn Fleur Laban and Carissa Rhodes. And in this text, I should have the page numbers written at the end of the citation, but they're talking about these nomadic pastoralist groups in Sudan. And let's peep the tradition here. Or the information here. The four major pastoral groups in southern Sudan include the Dinka, Nuer, Atuat, and Merle. According to their oral histories since the 18th century, these groups have raided each other for cattle and women. So remember that what is endemic of the nomadic pastoralist groups is that they're always raiding and stealing. We even have citations in the ancient Egyptian text where it's talking about these groups, these same groups, who would go into Kemet and raid it for women and for bounty and leave. So let's continue. Like most pastoral lineage societies around the world, raiding for animals and people is a time-honored activity. This is another text that individually supports what was stated, previously in another text. Almost all customarily rob and pillage their pastoral neighbors, for to continue long in a state of peace diminishes their wealth. You wonder why the United States can never have long-lasting peace anywhere. Why do they always have to wage war every so many years and be in other people's countries and things, having these little micro wars? Because the longer that the United States stays in peace, They do not develop wealth. And this idea comes out of their pastoral roots. And so it's no different amongst other pastoral groups. It's the same thing amongst the Hebrew Israelites when they left out of Egypt, allegedly, according to the story. They didn't build their own communities. They went and raided and committed genocide against the Canaanites and Amorites and took their land because it's too much work to build your own land. We just go rob, kill, and steal, from someone else and increase our wealth. That's the habit. That's the value system of these people. Thus, war and plunder become necessary. For example, the Dinka philosophy historically has been that many wives shall bring forth many daughters who shall be married with great numbers of cattle. So a woman is simply a means to an end. So when they go raid other pastoralist communities for cattle, they also take the women. Why do they take the women? So they can marry them off in the group, and the individual can get cattle because the cattle is part of the quote unquote bride price. So women are just a means to wealth for people in these societies. Thoidinka, Philip Thorne Moreau states, so Thoidinka is an individual that Philip was interviewing, and Thoidinka states the following: there has been a lot of raiding for greed. It has always been important to show we are good warriors, and when you are strong, you go and rob the weak. It was the formula for those days, and everybody did it. If you defeated another clan, you took their cows and women. We took the women to become wives while young girls could be married to other men and bring more cows. Small boys could raid for more cattle. This is the tradition, and these are African folks. This had nothing to do with Europeans. So Paul Lovejoy terms these pastoral practices as lineage slavery. He reasons that women and children abducted in raids are forcibly cut off from kin, and that the property element, the alien identity, the role of violence, and the productive and sexual exploitation of human beings is always present in pastoral raiding systems. This is not entirely correct in the case of the Dinka and Nuer. However, for kin are not always cut off, quote unquote, and numbers have returned to their own families in later years, particularly when it became time to get married. The nature of pastoral raiding in these societies took a turn for the worse with the arrival of a new group of pastoralists to the north. And so you got to remember, like a lot of the reason for the slave trade in West Africa was because of the Fulani pastoralists and Islam. That's another conversation for another day. And so this text here, Egyptian, Canaan, and Israel in Ancient Times by Donald B. Redford. It's showing the nature of the God of Israel. And what I add to this conversation is because of the culture of the people who project their image and their values onto God, and then claim God justifies their actions. And so in this text, it says dominating the primitive concepts of the community of nascent Israel was the notion of a contract between Yahweh, the God of a group, and the human community, therefore Israel. Sovereignty resided with Yahweh, not the community. And in this, he gives the actual verses for for these ideas. So that one is in Judges 8:23. The rules he laid down unilaterally, in fact, the human party to contract had no say in the matter, were draconian in the extreme, and the deities were utterly barbaric. Alien groups whose actions or even presence were deemed in opposition to Israel or consigned to genocidal slaughter at the behest of Yahweh. We see this with the Egyptians and the so-called Exodus. And so because the Egyptians have a value system rooted in a principle called Ma'at, it is in opposition to be able to raid and rape and pillage, women and children and other communities. And so they're in opposition to us. So we're in opposition. They're in opposition to our values. So we're in opposition to them. And so the judgment is that they must be slaughtered, and genocide must be committed unto them. And so you have this in Exodus 17 and 14, Numbers 31, 1 Samuel 15 and 3. Even fraternizing with foreigners brings the plague. Anyone who dissents Yahweh is burned up. Anyone who complains, he strikes with a plague or sends poisonous snakes after. Abhorrent cultic practices, even though indulged in innocently, brings death. That's why, for example, I don't, what's that? I forgot his name already. Pastor, dang it, he is out of Baltimore, but I think he's now in Atlanta, who was talking about burning sage is demonic. You know, that's the kind of mindset you have when you adopt, these nomadic pastoralist values. And so they're always in opposition to other groups in anything. That even lighting an incense or lighting some sage is a demonic act, according to these people. But these are the demonic acts here. A whole bunch of a town full of gay dudes raping, women all night, and then cutting up bodies, and then lying on why you had to cut up the body, et cetera, et cetera. And so, as I stated earlier, the Haparu, the Hebrews, are, known even in the biblical text, and they're known by a number of names. But Haparu is one of the main names, and the Amu is another. And even the Bible recognizes in Genesis 46 and 34 that all shepherds are an abomination to the Egyptians. Why? Because of their reprobate culture. And yes, thank you, Dr. Maad. It's Jamal Bryant. Jamal Bryant is the one who relatively recently tried to, make the argument that burning sage is demonic. And so these haramu, these Asiatic nomads from the eastern desert, this word hamu word for animal, beast, and cattle for Egypt. And so they're talking about their character as well as their lifestyle. And so with that, when you read the instructions of Mary Kara, it says, lo, the miserable Asiatic, and the word should be Amu. He is wretched because of the place he is in. So remember the conversation that we've been saying all this time. Because they didn't live in fertile places, that influenced their behavior. And so this was recognized even amongst the ancient Egyptians. So it says, lo, the miserable Asiatic. He is wretched because of the place he is in, short of water, bare of wood. Its paths are many and painful. Because of the mountains, he does not dwell in one place. Food propels his legs. He's always hungry. He fights since the time of Horus, that they're always warring. And since the time of Horus, this is a mythological deity. So since time immemorial, since we've known them to come on the scene, they have always been fighting and warring, not conquering nor being conquered, like a thief who darts about a group. And so this is during the first intermediate period, the 10th Egyptian dynasty. And so we got to keep these things in mind when we're talking about, saying these people. And I'll save these for another discussion, and I'll just end here. But I just wanted to make that point that, when we're looking at the story, it is not, I'm not being facetious here, and it's not without scholarship. We're saying all of this and showing you that, your environment shapes your behavior and culture, and that the value system that is promoted in the Bible is not one that we can utilize in this day and age. And we know that it is not the case because, you ask generally most people who go to church, even if they would agree with what goes on in those two stories for themselves, they would say, hell no. They wouldn't promote that. That's why they skip those stories in the church. And so this is why, you know, we have to be diligent. And, you know, and for those of us who want to, you know, challenge these people public, you got to know this text and read the entire stories, and don't let them come with that Holy Spirit crap and you don't understand and lean not on your own understanding and all this other kind of stuff to try to justify their reprobateness. And so I'm sorry, it is what it is. If you're a Hebrew Israelite, if you practice Judaism, or if you were a Christian, in my opinion, you have a you know tendency to be a rapist, a liar, and a thief. And because this is what you value, this is what you're trying to proselytize to us for us to adopt and pattern our lives accordingly to. Well, not on my watch. And so I haven't been able to keep up with what y'all been saying in the chat. So let me excuse me. Let me scroll up a bit. Let me just look at the phone real quick. Hold on. Horus means time. Horus means time. Wow, what? I assume that's supposed to be else. Are you going to omit? What are you talking about? Stop trying to regulate the peanut gallery, Mika. Kemet is only a portion of Egypt, not Egypt as a whole. The serpent, the owl, the vulture. I don't know, y'all in another conversation going on. Some Israelites say they have African bloodline, but they still don't like talking about it. They want to be Israel and not Kemet, Egypt. They don't have to be Kemet, Egypt. No one has to. You can value the ancient Egyptian religious tradition and spiritual tradition and just cultural tradition without having to claim that you are a bloodline relative of ancient Egyptians. And that's what a lot of these Hebrew Israelites are doing. They're trying to claim blood relationship with Israelites, you know, and make it a bloodline thing. And so I'm not even, you know, because all you have to do is challenge a Hebrew Israelite to take a blood test and a DNA test. And they are going to run from you like the plague. They're going to find all kinds of excuse. Well, it's not accurate and da 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 da. That's the white man's science. Yada 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 yada. They do everything to avoid a DNA test. So you know what I'm trying to teach you all is that if you're going to debate Christians and Israelites, don't debate them on history. The only people you can debate on history are people who are actual scholars. The Negroes from the church and those Israelites on the corner, they're not scholars. So you can't have a scholarly conversation with them. So this is an issue of logic here. And so you don't have to leave the Bible. You don't need to leave the Bible to have issues with the Bible and to find its flaws. You can leave the Bible how it is. The Bible does a good enough job by itself, you know, to dagger itself. Um, so yeah, I'm just going. Y'all having all kinds of conversation. It's too much. I have to review these comments when the video is done. Hold on. Let me get to this comment here. Oh, it hasn't shown up yet. Who is this? Nope. So, oh, you need a paper saying you're super smart. Okay. Nope, you don't need a paper per se, but you need to have and adhere to the rules of scholarship and evidence and proof. And that's not the tradition of the Bible seekers. Matter of fact, the Bible itself is anti-intellectual. And so I don't know why it's not showing up here, but I'll just read it. And Lion Times Baby says, Black Hebrew Israelites are in America, not the Middle East. What's next? You're going to call them a terrorist group? I can call them a terrorist group, an intellectual terrorist group. They have committed, they have, what's the word? Committed jihad on intelligence for as long as I can remember. And that's just what it is, just intellectual jihad. Anything that is intelligent and logical, the Hebrew Israelites are against it. And so they have waged war, so they are terrorists, in my opinion. But that's just all of Christianity and even Islam. They are anti-intellectual texts. And so that's going to be part of this series. I'm going to show you that the Bible itself, vilifies intelligence, which is why Adam and Eve were kicked out, because you were meant to be dumb cattle. That's all God of the Bible created you to be, dumb cattle. And they discovered the knowledge of self, and then God kicked them off, and now everybody is a sinner and have to earn their way back into heaven. Bantu Mandika says, what's your thoughts on those 59 coffins dug up in Kemet? I have no opinion because I don't know about them. I haven't read up on them. And so maybe you'll have to post a link and I can read it in the near future. So let me see. Let me see. Jasmine Red says, I think you really don't need the Bible to debate them. You can just see how they treat and value women. Most of these so-called woke men disrespect women, especially Black women, daily. Indeed. And, but the reason why you go to the Bible is because you want to find out what is the foundation. How are people justifying their actions? And so, are they justifying it via a religious text? And so, then you would have to attack the logic in the text. Because for those kind of people, you can't see, this is what you got to understand. You can't have a civil conversation with most Hebrew Israelites, most Christians, or whatnot. Because the Bible itself, the Quran itself, is an anti-intellectual book. And so to have a reasonable and rational conversation with most of them when it comes to the text, its value system, and history and all of that, you can't have it. And so for them, they are justified because in their eyes, the Bible itself is an unflawed book directly from God. So to question the Bible, to question the Quran, is to question the perfection of God itself. And that's the problem. And so since that is their foundation and their grounding, again, you can only really have a one-on-one sit down with the intelligent scholars of the group, serious scholars. Everyone else, it's an exercise in futility. Let me see. Lion's Time Baby says, kind of too religious for me. Using those choice of words, it sounds more like you are arguing your religion versus theirs. I haven't argued any religion, versus theirs. I'm arguing value systems and logic and inner logic. And so I'm just going to ask you. I don't know if Lion's Time Baby is a male or a female. But I'm going to ask you what I asked all the men at the very beginning of this conversation. Would you, if I am a guest in your home, I don't know where you live, but whatever city that you live in, I come to visit and you invite me to your home. And the Pride Parade is happening, just down the street from you, and then they take a left turn and come to your house and surround the house, and they saw me come in and they think that I'm looking all dapper and debonair, and they want to rape me. And if you have daughters, would you exchange your daughters, whether they are virgin or not, for me to be raped by the men outside? I want to ask you that, Lion's Time, baby. Let's see where your head is at right now and see if this is a religion, if I'm just doing another religion versus another. I haven't mentioned any other religions. This is just an issue of what should be common ass sense. Let's see. Most opponent religions to the Hebrews know no bounds to condemning them and goes to any length to bash their reputation. I don't have to do anything to bash their reputation. I just read from the book itself. So, you can answer that question, Lions Times, baby. I'm waiting. The chat comes in faster on my phone than it does, but on the back screen. So he says no, and the book does not condone that behavior. See, this is what I'm talking about here. This is why you can't have a rational conversation with anybody. It just did condone it on both ends twice. And there's other situations where they condone it as well. So, but no, he wouldn't do it himself. But this person is trying to justify and promote. See, again, I don't know, Lions Times, baby, if you're a man or female, but you have rape tendencies to even, try to justify that, and try to take up for that behavior, in the text. So you can't come to my house around my children and around my woman or whatnot. It just is what it is. And so a Kumfo Inku Apim says they have a record of killing people as well. Yahweh Ben Yahweh school in Florida. Yeah, I didn't mention the Yahweh Ben Yahweh group. And I know some people who some women who are Hebrew Israelites who are married to dudes who would still rape them. Now the reason why I didn't mention that, because that is not something that is unique to Hebrew Israelites. And most Hebrew Israelites that I know of aren't necessarily like that. But they try to justify it because they're supposed to be able to go into their woman anytime that they feel like it. And so the woman has no agency in these traditions. And so, but outside of Christianity and Islam and or whatnot, you'll find dudes, or out of the Hebrew Israelite tradition, you'll find dudes who will rape their own wives. A Hebrew in Arizona just murdered his wife and kids last year, Kumfo states. And earlier, Ma Howard made a comment, and I'm going to go back to their comment. Whoa, this is harsh. If people adopt a theology just as you did in your transition, people have a process. They all will be potential rapists. Yes. And we just read, the literature and the evidence that people, when you adopt a culture and a way of being and thought, you adopt their mannerisms and values. And so if that culture promotes rape, promotes misogyny, promotes murder and death, you have a greater potential because now your spiritual tradition justifies it. You all, Christians and Israelites and Muslims are potential slave owners in my opinion, because their traditions promote and condone and don't vilify slavery. Only against them, not slavery in general. Slavery is bad for us, But it's not bad if we enslave other people. That's the logic in the Abrahamic traditions. It says, okay, you like numbers. What is the percentage of Hebrew Israelites that are being caught or convicted of rape crimes? Do you have that data to make this assessment on? I understand your concerns. Just curious if that is hard data. Again, I didn't make the argument that once they become Hebrew Israelites that they just start raping. As I just stated here, for me, you are all potential rapists because of the stories that y'all justify in the text. And so, when I go into the Ephod tradition, for example, there's no justification for rape. I have yet to come across any of that where any of that is justified and the protagonist is saved from the wrath of God and the people, when they were involved in what we call in the hood fuckboy shit. It just doesn't happen. When I go and I look into the Ghana tradition or the Dagara tradition or the Bakongo tradition or the Amazulu tradition, I don't see that stuff. When I study Khoisan folks, even when I study Buddhists, people, I don't see that kind of stuff. But in the traditions of, for example, the Spartans, even though they don't have necessarily a religious tradition, your religion is your culture. When you look at the Spartans and the Greeks, when you look at the Romans, when you look at the Scott Irish and the British and the nomadic, German tribes and the nomadic, what's the Chinese groups, the of the Hans and the Mongoloids, those individuals, the Aryans, of India, etc. You see this tradition where this type of behavior is condoned, valued and promoted as just. That's the issue. And so if you can't agree that rape is wrong, that murder is wrong, that stealing from people is wrong, that vilifying them for having a different culture and heritage is wrong, then we just not cut from the same cloth. And that's just where I have to leave it, when it comes to that. And so let me see. But yeah, that's all I had. I don't have, much. So I appreciate you all listening to my ranting. So this is just part one, which was dealing on the models of manhood, as far as the Bible is concerned. So this is just, one of many examples of why I had to leave the Bible alone. It's just not a good model to follow. And so I appreciate everyone for listening. I appreciate all of those who have donated to the channel very greatly. And, again, we have a Patreon page. And so there are certain interviews and certain lectures that I do that are only for the Patreon, folks. So, if you want to check out some of those, I got Professor Manu Pim up there, another interview with Dr. Shamarka Keita on race, Dr. Shalima Mukinge, out of the Congo, Dr. Hunter Adams. There's a whole slew of interviews and videos that's only for the Patreon folks. So, I would, join and get access to those. And then in the coming months, when I'm doing stuff for the film, you'll get behind the scenes access and all of that good stuff. So thank you all for joining, and I will see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern time when I interview Dr. Jean-Philippe Gordon out of Guyana, but who lives on the West Coast of the United States today. Very, very powerful brother, glycobiologist, and we'll find out what all that means, on tomorrow at 7 p.m. And then, of course, on Sunday, we have Dr. Sadiqa Watson, who is a data analyst mathematician and statistician, and co-founder of Black Science Month. So I'll see you all then. And then for those who want to, continue the conversation, with me, y'all just want to argue or whatnot. I know how y'all are in Facebook and YouTube land. These are my contacts, and continue to support the channel. Hit me up. And if you are new, you're just scrolling, on this channel right now, and you want to, have more, you want to have access, you want to spy some more and just see when I'm going to have more of these conversations. Subscribe, and make sure that you hit the notification bell so that you all can get the memos of when these types of shows and interviews and conversations are going to happen. And I think on Friday night, maybe I may wait till like Saturday night, and we're going to have a discussion on the Black Panther film, Black Panther 2, and to see who should fill the shoes of Black Panther now that our good brother Chadwick Boseman has passed away. And so this is going to be an open community discussion. So that'll either be tomorrow night or Saturday. I'm a vouch for Saturday, and we'll go from there. So thank you all. Y'all have a good night, good rest of the evening. Have a blessed day. Peace.